Admiral Vexthai stood before the massive holographic display in the command center of the hegemony dreadnought Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms clasped behind his chitinous back. The star map before him showed their target system in perfect detail, a small yellow star with 9 planets, the third one hosting the species they had come to subjugate. The humans called it Earth. "Status report," Vexthai commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had overseen the conquest of 17 different worlds. His subordinates, a mixture of different species all serving under the Zephyrian banner, immediately responded to his call. "Fleet composition is holding steady, Admiral," reported Commander Thekvon from the tactical station. 1,047 ships of the line, including 12 dreadnoughts, 63 heavy cruisers, and 215 assault carriers. Our preliminary scans of the human system show minimal defensive capabilities. Vexthai's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. Minimal? Elaborate. Their largest vessels appear to be primitive chemical fuel rockets barely capable of reaching their own moon. We've detected some orbital installations, but nothing that registers above basic mining operations. Their energy signatures suggest they haven't even mastered controlled fusion on any meaningful scale. The Admiral moved closer to the display, studying the blue-green world that would soon be the 18th jewel in their hegemony's crown. And their response to our approach? "That's somewhat unusual, sir." Thekvon hesitated, which was uncommon for the battle-hardened officer. "They sent a message." "A surrender?" "No, sir. A warning." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's massive engines. Vexthai turned slowly to face his tactical officer, his compound eyes reflecting the light from the holographic display. "Show me." The star map dissolved, replaced by the image of a human female in what appeared to be an official military uniform. She was sitting behind a simple desk in a plain room, her dark hair pulled back severely, her brown eyes looking directly into the camera, with an expression that Vexthai found unsettling. There was no fear there, no desperation. Just a calm certainty that made his kitten crawl. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the human began, her voice steady and professional. "We are aware of your fleet's approach and your historical activities regarding other civilizations. Before you proceed with what I assume are hostile intentions, I want to extend a final diplomatic option." She paused, leaning forward slightly. "We know who you are, Zephyrian hegemony. We know what you've done to the Altarians, the vegan colonies, the Centauri Federation. We've studied your tactics, your technology, your methods. We've had time to prepare." Vexthai's second set of arms twitched involuntarily. How could these primitives know about their previous conquests? The hegemony had been careful to eliminate all communications from the worlds they'd taken. "We don't want war," Admiral Chen continued. "Humanity prefers peace, cooperation, and mutual benefit. But if you force our hand, if you refuse to turn your fleet around and leave our system in peace, then you will discover something about our species that we really didn't want to have to show you." Her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "We've learned things, Admiral Vexthai." The use of his name sent a shock through the bridge. Security Officer Klaxoth immediately began running diagnostics on their communication systems, searching for any possible breach. "We've learned about patience," Chen said, "about preparation, about the value of making your enemies underestimate you, while you figure out exactly how to hurt them in ways they never expected." She stood up, placing both hands flat on the desk. "We've learned about asymmetrical warfare from watching what your kind does to civilizations that try to fight you conventionally." Vexthai found himself leaning forward despite his intention to remain dismissive. There was something in the human's tone that suggested knowledge, planning, preparation.
"But how was that possible?"
Their intelligence indicated that humanity had only achieved spaceflight within the last century. "This is your warning, Admiral," Chen said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, yet somehow carrying more menace than any roar of defiance. "Turn your fleet around. Leave our system. Find somewhere else to expand your empire. Because if you force us to fight, we won't fight the way the others did. We won't line up our ships and trade volleys with you until you wear us down. We won't defend our cities and wait for you to siege them into submission." She smiled, and Vexthai felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. It wasn't a nice smile. "We'll fight the way humans fight when we're cornered, and Admiral, you really don't want to see what that looks like." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Navigation Officer Zefgol was the first to speak. "Admiral, Shall I plot a course change? Return to hegemony space? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every pair of eyes on the bridge turned to Vexthai, waiting for his response. The Admiral felt the weight of 18 successful campaigns pressing down on him, the momentum of an empire that had never known defeat in open warfare. Continue on course, he said finally. Increase speed to attack formation arrival. I want to be in orbital bombardment position within 6 rotations. Sir, Communications Officer Dralvin spoke up hesitantly. Perhaps we should at least inform High Command about the humans' apparent knowledge of our operations and... No. Vexthai's voice cut through the suggestion like a blade through gossamer. These primitives learned our names through espionage, perhaps from refugees who escaped our previous campaigns. They're trying to intimidate us with words because they know their weapons are useless. I've seen this before. But even as he spoke, Vexthai knew he was lying to himself as much as to his crew. He had seen desperation before, had heard the final threats of doomed civilizations as his fleets moved into position to crush them. This wasn't that. Admiral Chen had spoken with the confidence of someone holding a winning hand in a game where all the cards had already been dealt. Tactical, he called to Thekfon. What's our estimated time to weapons range? 47 hours at current velocity, Admiral. And our scout reports on their defensive positions? Thekfon consulted his displays, his expression growing increasingly puzzled. That's concerning, sir. Our scouts report that the humans appear to have withdrawn all their orbital installations. No defensive platforms, no weapon satellites, no military vessels in defensive positions. They're hiding? Unknown, sir. Long-range sensors show minimal activity on the planet's surface as well. It's as if they've disappeared. Vexthai moved back to the central holographic display, studying the tactical readouts with growing unease. In his experience, civilizations faced with imminent invasion behaved in predictable ways. They either gathered their fleets for a last desperate battle, fortified their worlds for siege warfare, or sent increasingly frantic diplomatic messages begging for mercy. Humans were doing none of these things. Sir, reported Intelligence Officer Kethvar from her station. I've completed analysis of the humans' transmission. She demonstrated knowledge of our fleet composition, our standard operating procedures, and our command structure. This suggests either sophisticated espionage capability or what? Or they've been planning for this confrontation for a considerable time. The bridge fell silent again as the implications sank in.
If humanity had been preparing for war with the hegemony for years, even decades, then Admiral Chen's warning took on an entirely different meaning.
But how could a species that had barely achieved orbital flight prepare for war against the galaxy's dominant military power? Analysis of their technology level? Vexthai asked, grasping for familiar ground. Chemical rockets, fusion power barely beyond experimental stage. No energy weapons we can detect, no force fields, no faster-than-light capability. Kethvar's report should have been reassuring, but somehow it wasn't. Admiral, by every measure we understand, they should be completely helpless against us. But they don't act like it. Vexthai stared at the blue world growing larger on their screens and tried to shake off the growing sense that they were walking into a trap whose nature he couldn't even begin to understand. He had conquered 17 worlds. He knew what victory looked like, what defeat smelled like, how species behaved when faced with annihilation. Humanity wasn't behaving like any of them. Maintain course and speed, he ordered, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. All fleet elements will maintain battle readiness. And I want continuous sensor sweeps of the entire system. If these humans are planning something, I want to know about it before they spring it. As the massive fleet continued its inexorable advance toward Earth, Admiral Vexthai couldn't shake Admiral Chen's final words from his mind. We'll fight the way humans fight when we're cornered. The problem was, he had no idea what that meant. In the depths of space behind them, automated sensors recorded the hegemony fleet's passage and transmitted the data through quantum entanglement communicators to hidden relay stations throughout the galaxy. The information raced ahead of the fleet at faster-than-light speeds, reaching Earth with details of fleet composition, weapon configurations, and tactical formations. Admiral Sarah Chen sat in her command bunker 3 miles beneath the Colorado Rockies, studying the incoming intelligence data with the focused intensity of a chess master examining her opponent's opening moves. Around her, thousands of technicians, strategists, and specialists worked at their stations, all part of a plan that had been 50 years in the making. The humans had been preparing for this war since the day they'd first detected Zephyrian transmissions and realized that somewhere in the galaxy there was a species that made a habit of destroying civilizations. They'd spent 5 decades studying, planning, and preparing for a war that would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Because Admiral Chen had been absolutely truthful about one thing. When humans were cornered, when their survival was at stake, they didn't fight fair. They fought to win. The hegemony fleet decelerated as it approached Earth's outer system, their massive engines creating beautiful auroras of discharged plasma against the darkness of space. Admiral Vexthai watched from his command throne as the tactical display updated with new information, showing the positions of planets, asteroids, and the conspicuous absence of any human defensive forces. "Scout reports coming in, Admiral," announced Thekfon. "Initial sweeps of the outer planets show extensive mining operations, but all appear to be automated. No life signs, no active defenses, no communication signals." Vexthai studied the data streaming across his personal display. Jupiter showed signs of massive atmospheric processing. Something was extracting gases from the planet's atmosphere on an industrial scale. Saturn's rings appeared to be partially disassembled, with clear evidence of large-scale mining operations. Even the asteroid belt showed signs of systematic harvesting. "How long have they been doing this?" he asked. Intelligence Officer Kethvar consulted her analysis. "Based on the scale of the operations and the amount of material moved, I'd estimate minimum 50 standard years, possibly longer. Admiral, they've been strip mining their entire system. The implications were staggering. A species that had only achieved spaceflight in the last century had somehow managed to industrialize their entire solar system. But where was all that extracted material going?" "Sir," called out sensor operator Quillnash, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm getting some very strange readings from Earth itself." Define strange. "The planet's electromagnetic signature is completely wrong. Instead of the chaotic patterns we'd expect from an inhabited world, I'm seeing organized, structured energy flows. It's almost like what? Like the entire planet has been converted into one massive machine." Vexthai felt his primary heart skip a beat. "That's impossible. Our intelligence clearly showed a normal inhabited world with billions of individual humans living in separate cities." "Yes, sir, but that was data collected from long-range observations. These close-range scans are showing something completely different." Quillnash manipulated his controls, sending the raw sensor data to the main display. "Look at this." The image of Earth that appeared was both familiar and utterly alien. The blue oceans and white clouds were there, but underneath them, the sensors revealed a vast network of energy conduits, massive underground facilities, and what appeared to be planetary-scale engineering projects that defied comprehension. "By the Great Darkness," whispered Communications Officer Drolvin, "the entire planetary crust has been hollowed out and restructured." Vexthai stood up from his command throne, his forearms trembling slightly. "How is this possible? How did our long-range surveillance miss this?" "Sir," Kethvar said quietly, "I believe they wanted us to miss it. Look at these energy patterns. They're designed to mimic natural planetary emissions when viewed from a distance. The humans deliberately made their world appear primitive and defenseless." The full scope of humanity's deception began to dawn on the bridge crew. For decades, possibly longer, humans had been preparing for war while carefully maintaining the appearance of a young, vulnerable civilization. They had industrialized their entire solar system while making it look like simple mining operations. They had converted their entire planet into some kind of massive defensive installation, while making it appear to be a normal, inhabited world. "Admiral," Tactical Officer Thekfon said urgently, "I'm detecting movement throughout the asteroid belt. Multiple contacts, moving into formation." The main display shifted to show the asteroid belt, and Vexthai felt his chitin go cold. What they had assumed were asteroids were revealing themselves to be something else entirely. Massive vessels that had been perfectly disguised as space rocks, each one the size of a hegemony dreadnought, but with energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. "Count?" Vexthai asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Still counting, sir. So far we've identified over 3,000 individual contacts, and more are activating every moment. 3,000 ships." The humans had 3,000 warships hidden in their asteroid belt, each one disguised as a piece of space debris. The hegemony fleet, for all its massive size and firepower, was suddenly outnumbered 3-1. "Sir," called out long-range sensors, "we're detecting similar activations throughout the outer system. Jupiter's moons are lighting up like military installations. Saturn appears to have an entire fleet hidden in its rings. Even the minor planets are showing artificial energy signatures." Vexthai sank back into his command throne, trying to process the scope of what he was seeing. Humanity hadn't just prepared for war. They had turned their entire solar system into the largest military trap in galactic history.
Admiral,
Kethvos said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've completed analysis of the energy signatures we're detecting. Sir, some of these installations are showing power outputs that exceed our theoretical maximums for matter-antimatter reactors. What are you saying? I'm saying they've developed technologies we don't understand, sir. These aren't just more ships than us, they're more advanced than us. The bridge fell into stunned silence. In the history of the Zephyrian hegemony, they had never encountered a species with superior technology. Their conquests had always been possible because they possessed the most advanced weapons and defenses in known space. Incoming transmission, announced Dralvin. Admiral Chen appeared on the main display again, but this time she wasn't sitting behind a simple desk. She was standing in what appeared to be a vast command center, with thousands of holographic displays showing tactical information, fleet positions, and weapon readiness indicators that stretched as far as the eye could see. Hello again, Admiral Vextai, she said, her voice carrying the same calm certainty, but now backed by the visible evidence of humanity's true capabilities. I hope you've had time to review your sensor data. I wanted to give you one more chance to reconsider your position. Behind her, Vextai could see human technicians working at stations that displayed technology far beyond anything the hegemony possessed. Energy weapons that seemed to manipulate space itself, defensive systems that bent light around entire ships, and what appeared to be faster-than-light communication arrays that should have been impossible according to known physics. As you've probably realized by now, Chen continued, we haven't been entirely honest about our capabilities. We've had a long time to prepare for your arrival, and we've used that time well. How Vextai found himself asking aloud, though he knew she couldn't hear him. You're probably wondering how a primitive species like humanity could develop such advanced technology in such a short time, Chen said, as if she had heard his question. The answer is simple, we cheated. She gestured, and the display behind her changed to show what appeared to be a vast underground complex filled with captured Zephyrian technology. Ships, weapons, computers, entire sections of hegemony installations, all being methodically dismantled and studied by human engineers. Every time you conquered a civilization, Admiral, you left survivors. Not many, but some always escaped to tell the tale. Over the past 70 years, we've made contact with every single refugee group, every survivor, every witness to your empire's expansion. We've given them homes, safety, and a chance to help us prepare for the day when you came for us. The implications hit Vextai like a physical blow. The refugees from 17 conquered civilizations, all working together, all sharing their knowledge of hegemony technology and tactics. Humanity hadn't just had time to prepare, they'd had teachers. We've had some of your best engineers working for us, Chen said, smiling slightly. Former hegemony citizens who decided they preferred freedom to serving an empire built on conquest. They've been very helpful in explaining the weaknesses in your ships, your weapons, your tactics. On the display behind her, Vextai could see Zephyrian scientists working alongside humans and other species, all collaborating on technologies that combine the best of dozens of different civilizations. But the real advantage we have, Admiral, isn't technology, it's motivation. Chen's expression hardened. You fight to expand an empire. We fight to protect our home. You see us as just another world to conquer. We see you as an existential threat to everything we care about. And that, Admiral, makes all the difference. The transmission ended, and the bridge of the Eternal Dominion was silent except for the increasingly urgent reports coming in from sensors and scouts. Admiral, Thekvon said urgently, the human ships in the asteroid belt are moving into attack formation. I'm reading massive energy buildups across their fleet. And, sir, added Quillinash, I'm detecting some kind of space-time distortion around Earth itself. It's like they're bending gravity. Vextai stared at the tactical display, watching as humanity's true strength revealed itself. 3,000 ships in the asteroid belt, massive installations throughout the outer system, planetary defenses that defied understanding, and technology that shouldn't exist. Orders, Admiral? Asked Thekvon. For the first time in his career, Vextai found himself considering retreat. But the momentum of 18 victories, the weight of hegemony expectations, and his own pride wouldn't let him take the logical course of action. All ships, prepare for combat, he ordered. We may be outnumbered, but we're still the Zephyrian hegemony. We've never lost a battle, and we won't start now. Even as he gave the order, Vextai couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to learn why that perfect record was about to come to an end. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the hegemony fleets approach with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete, the trap was revealed, and the enemy had chosen to spring it rather than retreat. Now came Phase 2, and Admiral Chen found herself hoping that the hegemony would prove more resilient than their previous opponents. Because humanity's war plan had been designed with the assumption that conventional victory wouldn't be enough. They needed to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. A demonstration so overwhelming that no other empire would ever consider Earth an easy target. They needed to win so decisively that the very idea of invading humanity would become unthinkable. And Admiral Chen was about to show the galaxy exactly what happened when you cornered a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history turning disadvantages into weapons. The first shots of the war came not from the massive energy cannons that both fleets possessed, but from weapons that shouldn't have existed. Admiral Vexthai watched in horrified fascination as space itself seemed to ripple around his lead scout ships, reality bending and twisting until the vessels simply ceased. "What just happened to Strike Group Alpha?" he demanded, his voice tight with confusion and growing fear. Sensor operator Quillnash frantically worked his controls, trying to make sense of readings that violated everything they understood about physics. "Sir, I'm not detecting explosions, debris, or energy weapon signatures. The ships appear to have been erased." "Erased?" "Yes, sir. One moment they were there, the next moment there was just empty space. Not destroyed, eliminated. As if they never existed at all." Admiral Vexthai felt his certainty cracking. In 18 campaigns, he had seen every weapon the galaxy had to offer. Plasma cannons that could vaporize entire cities, antimatter torpedoes that could crack planets, energy beams that could cut through the heaviest armor. But he had never seen weapons that could simply delete matter from existence. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," announced Communications Officer Drolvin. This time, the speaker wasn't Admiral Chen, but a middle-aged human male in a different uniform. He appeared to be standing on the bridge of one of the massive asteroid ships, surrounded by command stations that displayed weapon systems beyond hegemony understanding. "Admiral Vexthai," the man said, his voice carrying the professional courtesy of one military officer addressing another. "I'm Admiral Marcus Webb, commander of the Sol Defense Fleet. What you just witnessed was a demonstration of what we call reality displacement weapons, technology developed by combining human theoretical physics with engineering principles learned from the Etherian refugees you displaced 40 years ago." Webb gestured to something off-screen, and the display shifted to show a technical diagram of incomprehensible complexity. "The Etherians were energy beings, Admiral. They understood space and time in ways that matter-based species like ourselves struggle to comprehend. When your forces destroyed their physical forms, their consciousness survived long enough to teach us how reality itself can be weaponized." The demonstration continued as another group of hegemony scouts simply vanished from existence, leaving behind nothing but empty space, where moments before there had been ships, crews, and thousands of years of accumulated technology and experience. "This is impossible," Vexthai whispered, but even as he spoke, his sensor officers were confirming that 12 ships and their entire crews had been removed from the universe without leaving so much as a stray hydrogen atom behind. "The Centauri taught us about temporal manipulation," Webb continued, as if he were giving a lecture rather than conducting warfare. "The vegan biomech engineers showed us how to merge organic and mechanical systems in ways that transcend traditional limitations. The Altarians, before you wiped them out, had mastered gravity control to a degree that we're still learning to understand." As he spoke, space around the hegemony fleet began to distort in ways that made navigation computers scream warnings and gravitational sensors register readings that should have been impossible. Some ships found themselves suddenly accelerating toward empty space, while others experienced time dilation fields that made their crews age minutes in seconds. "Every species you've destroyed, Admiral, taught us something new about how to fight you," Webb said. "But more importantly, they taught us about your weaknesses." Intelligence Officer Kethvar looked up from her station with an expression of dawning horror. "Admiral, they're not just using advanced weapons. They're using our own tactical doctrines against us." "Explain." "Sir, every move we make follows standard hegemony engagement protocols. But they know those protocols. Every refugee who escaped our previous campaigns would have observed our tactics, our strategies, our standard operating procedures. They've had decades to study how we fight." As if to prove her point, the human fleet began moving in patterns that perfectly countered every tactical advantage the hegemony had traditionally relied upon. When Vexthai ordered his heavy cruisers to form a defensive wall, the human ships immediately shifted to attack formations specifically designed to break that particular defensive strategy. When he attempted to use the hegemony's superior speed to maneuver around the human fleet, he found his ships being herded exactly where the humans wanted them. "It's like fighting myself," he murmured, watching as 40 years of tactical experience became a liability instead of an advantage. "Admiral," Tactical Officer Thekfon called out urgently. "The human installations around Jupiter are activating." "Sir, you need to see this." The main display shifted to show Jupiter's massive bulk, but something was happening to the planet itself. The great red spot was expanding, but not naturally. It was being artificially enlarged by vast machines that seemed to be harvesting the storm's energy and converting it into some form of directed force. "They're weaponizing the planet's atmospheric dynamics," Thekfon said, his voice filled with awe and terror. "Admiral, they've turned an entire gas giant into a weapon." The proof came moments later, as a focused beam of energy that defied every known law of physics lanced out from Jupiter's storm. The beam didn't destroy the hegemony ships it struck, it transformed them. Hull metal became crystalline structures that shattered at a touch. Energy conduits became organic matter that writhed and died in the vacuum of space. Crew members found their bodies changing at the molecular level, becoming something that could survive in the hostile environment they had been cast into. "They're not trying to kill us," Vexthai realized with growing horror. "They're trying to change us." Admiral Webb's image reappeared on the communication screen. The Zephyrian hegemony has based its entire philosophy on the belief that might makes right, that superior technology and firepower justify conquest. But what happens when you encounter a species that doesn't play by those rules? As he spoke, more hegemony ships found themselves subjected to weapons that challenged the very nature of reality. Some were caught in temporal loops, forced to repeat the same few minutes of existence over and over. Others found themselves phase-shifted into parallel dimensions where they could observe but not affect the battle raging around them. A few unlucky vessels discovered that their crews had been mentally linked to the collective consciousness of every species the hegemony had ever conquered. "The answer," Webb continued, "is that you discover there are worse things than death. There are fates that make warriors question everything they believe about strength, dominance, and the nature of existence itself." Vexthai tried to process what he was seeing. His fleet was being systematically dismantled not by superior firepower, but by weapons that attacked the very concepts of warfare itself. Ships weren't being destroyed, they were being transformed into art installations, their crews preserved but fundamentally changed in ways that challenged their understanding of identity and consciousness. "Sir," Kefar reported quietly, "I'm receiving reports from our remaining scouts. The humans have similar installations throughout the system. Mars appears to be one massive computational array. Venus is generating some kind of exotic matter we can't identify. Even Earth's moon has been converted into what appears to be a dimensional gateway." "A gateway to where?" "Unknown, sir. But energy readings suggest it's connected to multiple other star systems." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just prepared to defend their home system, they had turned it into a hub for some kind of galactic network. They weren't just fighting the Zephyrian hegemony, they were fighting as part of a larger alliance that included every survivor of hegemony conquest. "Admiral," Communications Officer Dralvin announced, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 of our ships. The crews are requesting permission to defect to the human alliance." Vexthai felt something break inside his chest. In 40 years of military service, through 18 successful campaigns, he had never heard of hegemony personnel requesting to defect. The very concept was antithetical to everything their society stood for. "Denied," he said automatically, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sir," Thekfon said hesitantly, "perhaps we should consider withdrawing to reassess the situation." For a long moment, Vexthai stared at the tactical display showing the systematic neutralization of his fleet. Pride warred with pragmatism. Imperial duty fought against survival instinct. Then he noticed something that made his primary heart stop beating. "Where is Admiral Chen?" he asked. The question sent every sensor operator scrambling to scan the battlefield. They could locate Admiral Webb's flagship among the asteroid fleet, could track the massive installations throughout the system, could even identify the source of the exotic weapons being used against them. But Admiral Chen's ship was nowhere to be found. "Sir," Quillnash said slowly, "I'm not detecting Admiral Chen's ship anywhere in the system." "That's impossible." "She's the commanding officer. She has to be here directing the battle." "Sir," Kefar interrupted, her voice tight with urgency, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the Earth's moon. Whatever that dimensional gateway is connected to, It's about to activate. The moon's surface erupted with energy that made nearby stars look dim by comparison. Space twisted and folded, reality bent until it screamed, and through the gateway that humanity had built came something that made Admiral Vexthai's certainty finally completely shatter. Ships began emerging from the gateway. Not human ships, these were vessels of designs he recognized from hegemony intelligence files, Altarian crystal ships that should have been extinct, Centauri biomechanical vessels whose crews had supposedly been wiped out decades ago. Vegan energy constructs that the hegemony had personally seen destroyed. Admiral Chen's voice filled the communication channels, but now it wasn't coming from the Sol system. It was coming from the lead ship emerging from the dimensional gateway. "Hello again, Admiral Vexthai," she said, and behind her, Vexthai could see representatives of every species the hegemony had ever conquered. "I told you we'd learned things. I told you we'd had time to prepare." "What I didn't tell you is that we'd been preparing not just to defend Earth, but to liberate every world you've ever taken." The scope of humanity's plan finally became clear. This wasn't a defensive action. It was the opening move in a war of liberation that would span the entire galaxy. "The Zephyrian hegemony ends today," Admiral Chen announced as ships emerged from the gateway in numbers that dwarfed both fleets. "Not because we destroyed you, but because we're about to give every world you've conquered the tools to free themselves." Admiral Vexthai realized that humanity's warning hadn't been about Earth at all. It had been about the Empire that had thought itself invincible finally, meeting a species that specialized in proving that nothing was impossible. And the war was just beginning. Admiral Vexthai watched his universe collapse in real time as reports flooded in from across the hegemony. The communication array aboard the Eternal Dominion lit up with distress signals from 17 different star systems, each one telling the same impossible story. The conquered worlds were rising in coordinated rebellion, armed with weapons and knowledge that should not have existed. "Sir," Communications Officer Dralveen said, his voice hollow with disbelief, "we're receiving transmission from the Altarian system. The Human Alliance fleet has arrived there and is currently liberating the crystal farms." "That's impossible," Vexthai replied automatically. "The Altarian system is 47 light-years from here. Even if they left the moment we arrived, they couldn't have traveled that distance in time to—" "Sir," Intelligence Officer Kethver interrupted, "I believe they've solved faster-than-light communication and transportation on a scale we never imagined possible. These aren't just dimensional gateways, they're instantaneous transit networks, connecting every system the hegemony has ever touched." The main display shifted to show tactical data streaming in from across the galaxy. On Centauri Prime, the biomechanical factories that had been enslaved for 30 years were suddenly producing ships that immediately turned their weapons on hegemony installations. In the Vegan Nebula, energy beings that the hegemony had thought extinct were materializing inside hegemony command centers, their very presence causing technological systems to evolve beyond recognition. "How long have they been planning this?" Vexthai asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Based on the coordination and scale of these simultaneous operations," Kethvar analyzed, "minimum 50 years, but more likely closer to 70. "Sir, they've been building a galactic resistance network while we thought we were expanding an empire." Admiral Chen's voice echoed across the communication channels, but now it wasn't coming from a single source. The signal was being broadcast from hundreds of locations simultaneously, creating a chorus of liberation that reached every corner of hegemony space. "Citizens of the galaxy," she announced, "today we demonstrate that no empire, no matter how powerful, can survive when the people it oppresses refuse to remain oppressed." The display showed images from worlds across the galaxy. On each planet the hegemony had conquered, populations that had seemed broken and subjugated were suddenly revealing capabilities that defied every assessment the hegemony had made. Underground resistance networks that had been building strength for decades emerged into the light, armed with hybrid technologies that combined the best innovations of every conquered species. The Zephyrian philosophy has always been that superior technology and firepower justified dominion over others, Chen continued. But they made one critical error in their calculations. They assumed that conquest meant elimination, that subjugation meant the end of innovation. On the tactical display, Vexthai watched as hegemony installations throughout the galaxy found themselves under attack by forces that shouldn't exist. Former slaves were piloting ships that incorporated crystalline Altarian energy, focusing Centauri biomechanical self-repair systems, vegan exotic matter manipulation, and human ingenuity that had found ways to make all these technologies work together. What they discovered instead, Chen said, is that oppression doesn't eliminate creativity, it focuses it. Every species they conquered spent years, decades, studying their oppressors, learning their weaknesses, and waiting for the moment when they could turn that knowledge into liberation. Tactical Officer Thekfon looked up from his station with an expression of growing panic. Admiral, we're receiving retreat orders from High Command. The Hegemony Council has ordered all military forces to fall back to core systems for defensive operations. Retreat orders? Vexthai had never heard those words in the context of hegemony military operations. Sir, the simultaneous uprisings across 17 systems have overwhelmed our occupation forces. We're losing entire worlds every hour. The scope of humanity's strategy was becoming clear. This hadn't been a defensive action against a single hegemony fleet. It had been the coordinated opening of a galactic war that turned every conquered world into a battlefront. The humans had spent decades not just preparing Earth's defenses, but building a network that could instantly arm and coordinate every resistance movement across the galaxy. Admiral, Sensor Operator Quilnash called out urgently. I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout local space. Something is happening to the dimensional gateways. The main display shifted to show the space around Earth's moon, where the dimensional gateway was expanding rapidly. But instead of allowing more ships to pass through, the gateway was changing, becoming something else entirely. Admiral Webb's voice joined the communication channel. Admiral Vexthai, you and your fleet have a choice to make. You can continue to fight for an empire that is currently collapsing across the galaxy, or you can accept the reality of the new galactic order. What new order? Vexthai demanded. The one where species determine their own destinies, Admiral Chen's voice replied. Where technology serves all people, not just those with the biggest fleets. Where the galaxy's resources are shared rather than hoarded by empires built on conquest. The gateway around Earth's moon completed its transformation, becoming something that resembled a massive communications array more than a transportation device. Suddenly, every screen on every ship in both fleets lit up with images from across the galaxy. Citizens of formerly conquered worlds were speaking directly to the hegemony fleet. Altaiarian crystal singers whose songs had been silenced for 40 years shared their stories of resistance and hope. Centauri bioengineers who had been forced to create weapons of war showed the medical technologies they had secretly developed to heal the damage caused by conquest. Vegan energy beings demonstrated how they had learned to exist in physical space again, driven by the desire to help other species achieve their own liberation. This is what the hegemony never understood, said a voice Vexthai recognized. It was Admiral Caxton, his former commanding officer who had disappeared during the conquest of the Centauri system 30 years ago. You can conquer a world, but you can't conquer an idea. And the idea that people should be free to determine their own destiny is one that grows stronger with every attempt to suppress it. Vexthai stared at the image of his former mentor, trying to process what he was seeing. Admiral Caxton? You were reported killed in action. I was liberated, Vexthai, just as you can be if you choose. Caxton appeared to be standing on the bridge of a ship that combined technologies from a dozen different species. The humans showed me something that the hegemony never could, that strength doesn't come from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to create something better.
Around them, the battle had effectively ended not through victory or defeat, but through transformation.
Hegemony ships found themselves surrounded not by enemies, but by representatives of the new Galactic Alliance offering choices instead of ultimatums. Every member of your crew, Admiral Chen announced, has the option to join us, to return to hegemony space, or to find their own path among the stars. We're not interested in forced conversions or conquered populations. We're interested in voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. Communications Officer Drelvan looked up from his station with an expression of wonder. Sir, we're receiving applications for asylum from 60% of our fleet. Crew members are requesting permission to transfer to the Alliance. And the others? The others are requesting permission to return home, to help organize the peaceful transition of hegemony worlds to the new alliance. Vexthai felt the weight of 40 years of certainty crumbling around him. What about conquest? What about the glory of empire? What about the natural order of the strong ruling the weak? Admiral Chen appeared on his personal communication screen, and for the first time he could see something like compassion in her expression. Admiral, the natural order isn't about the strong ruling the weak. It's about all of us becoming stronger together than any of us could be alone. Behind her, the command center that had seemed so impressive before revealed its true nature. It wasn't a military installation designed to wage war. It was a coordination center designed to foster cooperation between hundreds of different species, each contributing their unique capabilities to solve problems that none of them could address alone. The hegemony fell not because humans defeated it in battle, Chen explained, but because we offered the galaxy something better. We offered the choice to be part of something larger than conquest, something more meaningful than empire. The display showed images from across the galaxy as hegemony installations transformed into research centers, communication hubs, and cultural exchange facilities. Former weapons factories became manufacturing centers for technologies that improved life for everyone. Former military academies became universities where species shared knowledge and learned from each other. The question now, Admiral Webb said, is what you choose to do with the rest of your life. You can cling to an empire that no longer exists, or you can help build something better. Vexthai looked around his bridge at crew members who were already making their choices. Some were downloading translation protocols to communicate with the Alliance representatives. Others were requesting transfer to ships returning to hegemony space to help with the transition. A few were simply sitting quietly, trying to process a reality that had changed completely in the span of a few hours. What guarantees do we have? He asked finally. The same guarantee everyone in the Alliance has, Chen replied. The guarantee that your voice will be heard, that your contributions will be valued, and that you'll have the freedom to pursue your own definition of a meaningful existence. For the first time in his adult life, Admiral Vexthai found himself considering a future that wasn't defined by military conquest or imperial expansion. Around him, the hegemony fleet was peacefully dissolving as individual crew members chose their own paths forward. Admiral, Tactical Officer Thekfon said quietly, what are your orders? Vexthai studied the tactical display one final time, seeing not conquered territory or strategic positions, but star systems where millions of beings were experiencing freedom for the first time in their lives. 5 years after the dissolution of the Zephyrian hegemony, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Alliance Coordination Station, watching ships from 300 different species dock at the massive orbital facility that had been built where Earth's moon once stood. The moon itself had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, a living archive containing the cultural knowledge and technological innovations of every species in the known galaxy. Final casualty reports, Admiral, said her aide, Commander Maria Santos, offering her a datapad that contained information Chen had been dreading to review. Chen accepted the pad and scrolled through the numbers. 17,430, 2 total casualties across all 17 liberation campaigns. She set the pad down and stared out at the bustling traffic of the new galactic civilization. 17,000 souls lost, ending a war that had claimed billions over the past century. The hegemony's own records show they lost an average of 2 million beings per conquest, Santos observed quietly. By any historical measure, this was the least costly regime change in recorded galactic history. Every life lost still matters, Maria. Every single one. Chen touched the memorial wall that displayed the names of every being who had died in the liberation campaigns. But I suppose Admiral Vexthai was right about one thing. When species work together instead of conquering each other, the results can be extraordinary. Through the massive transparent aluminum windows, they could see the construction of humanity's newest contribution to galactic civilization. A massive ring structure around Sol that would serve as a cultural and educational exchange hub for the entire galaxy. The project incorporated construction techniques from the Altarians, biomechanical engineering from the Centauri, energy manipulation from the Vegans, and human project management that somehow made the impossible seem routine. Ma'am, Santos said, consulting her communicator, Admiral Vexthai is requesting permission to come aboard. He says he has the final reports from the Hegemony Transition Council. Chen nodded. Over the past 5 years, Vexthai had become one of the Alliance's most effective coordinators, helping former hegemony worlds transition to self-governance, while maintaining the beneficial aspects of galactic connectivity. His intimate knowledge of hegemony systems and culture had proven invaluable in ensuring the transition was as smooth as possible. When Vexthai arrived at the observation deck, Chen was struck once again by how much he had changed. The rigid military bearing was gone, replaced by something more thoughtful and contemplative. His ornate hegemony uniform had been replaced by the simple practical clothing favored by Alliance coordinators. Admiral Chen, he said, offering the formal greeting gesture that had been developed to accommodate the greeting customs of all Alliance species. The final world has completed its transition to self-governance. Kepler. 442b? Yes. The former mining colonies have established their own parliamentary system and requested membership in the Economic Cooperation Treaty. They're particularly interested in contributing to the Terraforming Research Consortium. Chen accepted the final report and found herself smiling at the irony. The last world conquered by the hegemony had become the first to develop revolutionary new techniques for planetary rehabilitation. Their experience being strip-mined had given them unique insights into how to repair ecological damage. "What are your plans now?" she asked Vexthai. "Your role as transition coordinator is officially complete." Vexthai moved to stand beside her at the window, watching as a massive Centauri bioship gently interfaced with the station's docking systems. "I've been offered a position with the Interspecies Archaeological Consortium. They want me to help explore some of the older hegemony installations to recover lost cultural artifacts from conquered civilizations." "That sounds like meaningful work. It feels strange," he admitted. "Spending my life recovering things I helped destroy. But the human concept of redemption is appealing." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the incredible diversity of ships and beings that moved through the space around the station. Chen reflected on how the view would have been incomprehensible to someone from 5 years ago. Dozens of species working together not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. "Admiral," Vexthai said quietly, "I've never properly thanked you."
Thanked me for what?
"For proving me wrong. For showing me that there was an alternative to the only way of life I'd ever known." He gestured toward the busy space lanes. "For giving the galaxy this." Chen considered her response carefully. "We didn't give the galaxy anything, Admiral. We just removed the barriers that prevented the galaxy from becoming what it wanted to be. Is that how humans see it? That's how humans see everything. We've never believed that anyone needs to be conquered for their own good, or that superior technology grants moral authority. We just believe that everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path." A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Commander Santos answered it, then turned to Chen with an expression of excitement. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Deep Space Exploration Fleet. They've made contact with a previously unknown civilization." Chen and Vexthai exchanged glances. First contact with new species had become routine over the past few years, as the Alliance's expanded exploration capabilities reached deeper into the galaxy, but each one still carried the potential for significant developments. "Put it through," Chen said. The image that appeared on the communication screen showed Captain Elena Vasquez, commander of the exploration vessel New Horizons, standing in what appeared to be a vast crystalline structure. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood beings that looked like living geometric equations, their forms shifting and changing in patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles. "Admiral Chen," Vasquez said, "I'd like you to meet the architects. They're the species responsible for creating the dimensional gateway network that the Alliance has been using." Chen felt her heart skip a beat. The dimensional gateways had been one of humanity's greatest innovations, allowing instantaneous travel and communication across galactic distances. To learn that they had been created by someone else fundamentally changed their understanding of the galaxy. One of the architect beings stepped forward, its form stabilizing into something resembling a complex crystalline flower. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, carrying harmonics that made the station's hull resonate like a musical instrument.
"Greetings, builders of cooperation," the architect said.
"We have been observing your species and your alliance with great interest. You have used our gateway network in ways we never anticipated, not for conquest or expansion, but for connection and mutual support." "You've been watching us?" Chen asked. "We have been watching the galaxy for millennia, waiting for a species to emerge that could demonstrate the principles of cooperative civilization. Many species have used our gateways, but always for purposes of expansion and domination." Another architect joined the conversation, its form resembling a spiral galaxy in miniature. "The Zephyrian hegemony used our network to conquer 17 worlds. We considered closing the gateways permanently to prevent further abuse." Chen felt a chill of understanding. "But you didn't. We detected the emergence of your resistance network," the first architect continued. "We observed how humans and the species they contacted used our gateways not to project power, but to share knowledge, coordinate assistance, and build connections. You proved that the network could serve its intended purpose." Vexthai stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. What was the intended purpose? The architect's forms shifted into configurations that suggested amusement, to serve as the foundation for a galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. To allow species to share knowledge and resources while maintaining their individual identities and autonomy. Captain Vasquez gestured to the crystalline structure around them. "Admiral, they want to offer the Alliance full access to their technology. Not just the Gateway Network, but scientific principles that could revolutionize our understanding of physics, biology, consciousness, and dimensional engineering. Chen found herself smiling at the beautiful irony of the situation. Humanity's greatest achievement hadn't been developing advanced technology, it had been proving worthy of technology that already existed. "What do you want in return?" she asked the architects. "Nothing that you are not already providing," came the response. "Continue to demonstrate that cooperation is stronger than conquest. Continue to show that diversity creates strength rather than weakness. Continue to prove that the galaxy can become something greater than the sum of its parts." The transmission ended, leaving Chen and Vextai alone on the observation deck, both trying to process the implications of what they had learned. "So the humans didn't really win the war," Vextai said thoughtfully. "No," Chen replied. "We won something better than a war. We won the right to be part of something that was waiting for us all along." They watched as ships continued to dock and depart from the station, representatives of hundreds of species working together to explore the galaxy, share knowledge, and build a civilization based on choice rather than conquest. "You know what the strangest thing is?" Chen said. "What?" "The hegemony could have had all of this. All they had to do was ask instead of demand, invite instead of conquer, share instead of hoard." Vex, they considered this for a moment. Perhaps that's the real lesson. That the greatest victories are the ones where everyone wins. Outside the window, the star Sol burned steadily, its light illuminating a galaxy where the age of conquest had ended and the age of cooperation had begun. In the depths of space, the dimensional gateways hummed with traffic as beings from hundreds of worlds shared knowledge, art, music, and dreams. Admiral Sarah Chen had delivered humanity's warning to an invading fleet, but in the end, the warning had been unnecessary. The galaxy had been waiting for someone to prove that there was a better way to live among the stars, and humanity, with the help of every species that refused to accept that conquest was inevitable, had finally shown the universe what that better way looked like. The invasion fleet had ignored humanity's warning, and it had been their final error. But it had also been the first step toward a galaxy where warnings would no longer be necessary, because no one would choose conquest when cooperation offered so much more. In the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't military victory. It was proving that even in the vast darkness between the stars, hope could find a way to shine. "Stand down all weapons," he said finally. "Open communication channels to the Alliance Coordination Center and prepare to learn what the galaxy looks like when it's not divided between conquerors and conquered." As the last shots of the war that ended an empire echoed into silence, Admiral Vextai realized that humanity's greatest victory hadn't been military at all. They had won by proving that there were alternatives to the only way of life the hegemony had ever known. And in the depths of space, broadcast across a galactic network that connected hundreds of worlds, the news spread that the age of conquest was over and the age of cooperation had begun.